War breaks out, and Iran finds itself caught in the crosshairs of the world's superpowers. They had made a solemn pledge to remain neutral, but that promise turned out to mean absolutely nothing. With the fate of both the nation and the entire globe hanging in the balance, Iran is forced to take on enemies that are completely out of its league. At the same time, two of the most powerful countries on earth try to push their weight around and impose their will on this newly modernized nation. Like most international power struggles, the backstory is layered, messy, and anything but simple. To boil it down, during World War I, large chunks of the Middle Eastern country, then known as Persia, were occupied by the Ottoman Empire, Britain, and Russia. On top of that, Germany wielded significant influence there, even though Persia was officially a neutral nation. After the war, a nationalist named Reza Khan led a coup that toppled the government. He first made himself Minister of War, then Prime Minister, and eventually crowned himself Shah of Persia, changing his own name to Reza Pahlavi in the process. In 1935, the country changed its name from Persia to Iran, which it remains to this day. Keep in mind, this is just the bare-bones version of a far more complicated series of events. Anyway, because of their painful history of being occupied, the Iranians were understandably less than thrilled with the British and the Russians, who had by then become the Soviet Union. So Iran leaned toward Germany, a major trading partner. At the time, Iran was going through massive economic, technological, and military reforms, and German experts were brought in to help. Between 600 and 1,000 Germans lived in Iran, mostly working in communications and transport, including technicians from the Junkers Aircraft Company. When World War II broke out, Iran declared neutrality, but that didn't mean anyone left them alone. The British still had huge stakes in Iran, including the Abadan oil refinery, which pumped out about 8 million tons of oil a year for them. And let's be real, wartime economies were a total mess. Sound familiar? Prices shot up, gas became painfully expensive, and everyday basics cost way more than they should. Then Germany launched Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union, in 1941. Suddenly, the Soviets were allies with the British, and Iran found itself in an incredibly dangerous position. Everyone feared Germany would strike toward the oil-rich Caucasus, and once they got there, they wouldn't stop at the Iranian border. A German-controlled Iran would cut off British access to Iranian oil and threaten the vital supply route between British-held Egypt and India, as well as trade routes to the Soviet Union. Both superpowers saw the strategic need to occupy Iran, but they wanted a better excuse than just grabbing it. They put diplomatic pressure on Reza Pahlavi to kick out all German nationals and let them use a key railroad. The Shah refused. A joint British-Soviet invasion became inevitable. On paper, Iran was completely outgunned by two of the world's most powerful militaries. On Iran's side, 9 army divisions, backed by a growing armored force that included 50 Czech TNHP light tanks, 50 tankettes armed with just 2 machine guns each, and maybe up to 100 armored cars fitted with 37mm guns. They also had at least 175mm and 100mm howitzers, plus plenty of mortar and lighter artillery, though exact numbers are hard to pin down. The Air Force was weak, mostly outdated planes with only about 40 in flyable condition. Some reports claim Iran had at least 10 P-40 Tomahawks bought from the US. But even if that's true, they played no role in the fighting. They were reportedly still sitting in their shipping crates. The Navy was tiny. 2 Italian-built sloops of 950 tons, each small ships like slow, less agile destroyers meant for coastal patrol, anti-aircraft, and anti-submarine work, plus about 10 smaller patrol boats, more of a coast guard than a real navy. On the other side, the British sent the 8th and 10th Indian Infantry Divisions, backed by an armored force centered on light tanks. Their air support included a squadron, each of Hurricane fighters, Blenheim bombers, Vickers Vincent biplane scout bombers, and 6 Vickers Valencia transports. They also had a naval force with several sloops and at least one armed merchant cruiser. The Soviets, meanwhile, threw subtlety out the window and sent the 44th, 47th, and 53rd Armies, plus several hundred tanks, most of them outdated T-26 light tanks, and over 400 fighter planes, more than enough to completely crush Iran by sheer numbers. On August 25, 1941, the invasion of Iran, codenamed Operation Countenance by the British, kicked off. The overall strategy was a classic pincer movement. The British invaded from the south through bases in Iraq, while the Soviets struck from the north through the Caucasus and Central Asia. Iran knew it stood almost no chance against such overwhelming force and begged the United States to help them keep their neutral status. President Roosevelt's response was bitterly disappointing. In so many words, he said that the threat from Nazi Germany justified any measures to stop them. He put it more elegantly, but the bottom line was clear. Iran was on its own. The invasion began at dawn on the 25th. The HMS Shoreham turned the Palong into a coral reef with its first salvo. An amphibious landing by the Indian 8th Division quickly secured the vital oil refineries at Abadan, while the port of Bandar Shapur was captured by an Australian merchant cruiser. The Iranian sloop Babur was sunk by the Australian sloop Yara. RAF Blenheim bombers hit several airfields, wiping out most of Iran's air force. A few Iranian fighters did get airborne, but they weren't a threat, just target practice for the escorting Hurricanes. The ground invasion kicked off as the Indian 8th Division left their base in Basra, Iraq, and surged into Iranian territory, while the 10th Division pushed in from the border town of Qasr-e-Shirin. They made some early gains, but the Iranians fought way above their weight class, and both attacks hit stubborn resistance by August 27th. Those setbacks were temporary, though by the next day, the British landed serious blows, capturing Shahabad and the regional capital of Kermanshah. Up north, the Soviet 44th Army and Red Navy elements captured the Caspian coastal town of Astara. They were briefly stalled at the city of Rasht and the port of Bandar Anzali. Then Soviet bombers took to the skies, pounded the city, and it surrendered by August 28th. The 53rd Army struck toward the city of Mashhad, seizing the airport. The Iranian 15th Division fought back as hard as they could, but they were shattered, and Red Army soldiers captured the city. The outdated Soviet T-26 tanks, normally no match for German panzers, faced almost no real resistance in Iran. The handful of biplanes the Iranians managed to get off the ground were swarmed by hundreds of Soviet fighters. With no other options left, the Shah asked for a ceasefire as British and Soviet forces linked up on August 30th and 31st, effectively ending the fighting. In total, the British lost 22 killed and 42 wounded. The Soviets lost around 40 dead. Iranian losses were about 800 soldiers and civilians killed, though the exact numbers are unknown. Despite putting up a fight, Iran was simply overwhelmed. They lacked the command and communication gear to coordinate their defenses, were caught completely off guard, and were massively outnumbered. The breakdown in leadership was so bad that some generals fled the battlefield, abandoning their own men. The Anglo-Soviet invasion lasted just 6 days. On September 16th, Reza Shah abdicated in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, who was far more cooperative with the Allies. The former Shah would spend the rest of his life in exile in South Africa. With the Allies now firmly in control of Iran, they demanded the country cut all ties with Germany and the other Axis powers. In January 1942, Britain, the Soviet Union, and Iran signed the Tripartite Treaty of Alliance. The treaty guaranteed Iran's sovereignty and most importantly stated that the Allies would withdraw from Iran after the war. In September 1943, Iran declared war on Germany. A few months later, Iran hosted the famous meeting between Winston Churchill, Joseph Stalin, and Franklin Roosevelt, where they hashed out war strategy and plans for the post-war world. During the war, Iran became a vital link, allowing millions of tons of Lend-Lease supplies to reach the Soviet Union from the United States. But that came at a heavy price, with so many resources and so much manpower diverted to the Trans-Iranian Railway. Not enough was left for farming. That led to inflation, severe food shortages, and a devastating famine across the country. When the war ended, Britain honored its treaty obligations. British and American troops pulled out in early 1946. The Soviets, however, needed some extra persuasion. They had been secretly funding at least 2 separatist movements, one in Azerbaijan, another in Kurdistan inside Iran's northern territory. But that's a story for another day. Finally, in May 1946, the Soviets left, and just like that, one of the first episodes of the Cold War came to a close.